My sister told everyone I was the villain. Have you ever tried to protect yourself and somehow ended up being the bad guy? Because that's exactly what happened next. After I refused to drop the fraud report, my sister didn't escalate legally. She escalated socially, and honestly, that hurt more. It started quietly, an Instagram story, a vague post. No one talks about how painful betrayal from your own family feels. No names, but everyone knew. Then came the DMs. My cousin asked, "What happened? Why is she saying you're threatening her?" Threatening her? Interesting rewrite. By the end of the week, the story had evolved. According to her, I didn't report fraud. I tried to ruin her life. I didn't protect my credit. I chose money over family. And my personal favorite. I've always been jealous of her. Jealous? Of what exactly? The $18,000 debt? The pattern of manipulation? But narratives don't need logic. They need emotion, and she knew how to sell emotion. She cried in front of relatives. She told them she was mentally struggling. She said the police report gave her panic attacks. And the worst part? My mom didn't correct it. She didn't defend me. She stayed quiet, and silence can look like agreement. At the next family dinner, the air felt different. My aunt barely looked at me. My uncle made a comment about legal threats tearing families apart. Legal threats? I reported fraud. But in the retelling, I became aggressive, cold, transactional. My sister sat at the table like a wounded angel. Soft voice, tearful eyes, perfect timing. When someone asked, "Did he really call the bank on you?" she nodded slowly, as if I had betrayed a sacred oath. No one asked what she did first, because she controlled the narrative early. And here's something I learned. The first version of a story people hear usually sticks, even if it's incomplete. I tried to defend myself, but every time I explained, it sounded defensive. Because I was defending, which somehow made me look guilty. That week, something else happened. A relative removed me from a family group chat. No explanation, just gone. And that hit harder than I expected. Because now it wasn't just tension, it was social exile. My sister had weaponized sympathy, and I underestimated how powerful that is. Then came the public post. She didn't name me, but she wrote, "Some people think money matters more than blood. I hope they can live with that." Hundreds of comments, support. "He's toxic. You deserve better. Cut him off." I stared at my screen. It was surreal, because I knew the truth. But the truth wasn't viral. Her version was. That night, my mom called. Not to apologize, not to clarify, to ask me to stop responding. She said I was making things worse, by telling the truth. I asked her directly, "Do you believe I was wrong?" Long pause, then she said something that shattered me. "I believe you could have handled it differently." Different how? Let it slide? Pay her debt quietly? Protect the image? That's when I realized this wasn't about right or wrong. It was about comfort. I made everyone uncomfortable because I introduced consequences, and consequences expose patterns. But here's the twist. 2 weeks later, one of my cousins messaged me privately. She said, "I think she did this to me too. Different card, smaller amount, but same behavior." Suddenly, the story wasn't isolated, it was repeating. And guess what? My sister had told her the same thing she told everyone else about me, that she was misunderstood, that she forgot, that it was temporary. Pattern confirmed. I didn't post it publicly. I didn't screenshot it. I kept it quiet. Because this wasn't about revenge, it was about boundaries, but karma has timing. A few days later, my mom called again. This time she sounded different, panicked. She said the bank contacted her about a missed loan payment. And when she asked my sister about contributing, my sister exploded, said it wasn't her responsibility, said my mom offered to help. Offered. Interesting word, because manipulation often feels voluntary. That was the moment my mom's voice cracked, not at me, at reality. The version she protected was starting to collapse, and suddenly, I wasn't the villain anymore. I was the warning she ignored. But here's where it gets worse. My sister found out my cousin contacted me, and she accused me of turning the family against her. The irony was overwhelming. She built a narrative. But the second fax entered the room. I became manipulative. Projection is powerful. That night I made a decision. I stopped defending myself publicly. I stopped explaining. I stopped engaging. Because sometimes the strongest move is silence backed by documentation. And I kept every record, every statement, every inquiry, every message, not to destroy her, but to protect myself. And now I need to ask you something. If someone lies about you publicly, do you fight back loudly? Or do you wait for the truth to surface on its own? Because in episode 5, the financial pressure explodes. The bank doesn't just call my mom, they escalate. And this time, it's not just reputation on the line, it's assets. If you want to see how deep this actually goes, make sure you subscribe right now. Turn on notifications, because what happens next doesn't stay online. It becomes legal, and when money, pride, and denial collide, families don't just argue, they fracture. And here's the part nobody talks about. When someone rewrites the story about you, you don't just lose reputation, you lose relationships, you lose invitations, you lose conversations that never happen again. And the worst part, you start questioning yourself. Not because you're wrong, but because isolation is loud. There were nights I replayed everything. Should I have just let it go? Should I have paid it quietly? Should I have protected the illusion instead of the truth? But every time I opened my bank app, every time I looked at the attempted credit inquiry, every time I remembered the silence when I asked, would she have stopped? I knew. This wasn't about pride, it was about patterns. And patterns don't fix themselves, they escalate. Which brings us to what happened next, because when the bank called my mom again, it wasn't just a reminder, it was a warning. And this time it wasn't about a few $1,000s, it was about something much bigger: assets, legal liability, and a deadline. In episode 5, the financial pressure explodes. And when money runs out, so do excuses. If you think this is just family drama, you haven't seen what happens when debt meets denial. Subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next, because episode 5 is where everything stops being emotional and starts becoming legal. See you in the next episode.